I'm back. Well, think of this as sort of part 2 of this fabulous Marshall amplifier from 1976. And basically, well, you don't see many of these, and you don't see many with this cover on either. This nice green cover, as they were back in the day, so to speak. Anyway, what I want to do is sort of run over the amp as what you've got in it, and you know, maybe you'll get to hear it later. Well, you probably will. There it is in all its glory. And if you're not into the you know, the older material, the older amps, the vintage amps, call it what you will, or just the old fart amps, take your pick, call it what you will, as I said. If you're not into that, this will look terrible. But if you are into it, well, you know good stuff when you see it. And there's one thing for sure, Marshall don't really make them exactly the same as this any longer. And that's for good reason. It's because the law changed and they have to meet all the standards these days. But we're going to have a look around in here, by the way, as part of this sort of review of this one, at some of the other amps that are sort of in here and why, which should be interesting. I've probably showed them before in other videos at some stage, but for now they might be very interesting. Well, I think we should start off as we mean to proceed, really, particularly on this amplifier. Well, first of all, what is it? Well, anybody who hasn't watched the previous video where it was repaired may or may not know what this amp is. You'll remember, maybe you'll remember, looking back at people like Eric Clapton, playing a thing called a blues breaker combo. And what sets this one apart from the blues breaker is, you go and look at those older combo amps and they had a sort of panel across about this height. You notice this one doesn't have that panel. It goes all the way up. I think this model is, the designated model is a 2100 combo. As I said, from 1976. Now, it might have a different designation, but it's a JMP amp, which puts it nicely in the older vintage stuff. Its title's called Lead and Bass 50 watt, so it's a 50 watt amp. There's the old style grill. You don't see much of that around anymore. In fact, as I look around in here, I don't actually have any with the exact same grill. I've got something over there that I'll show you a bit later that's got a similar sort of what they call salt and pepper grill, but that's another story. We'll come and look at that a bit later. Now, as you see on this one, it's had a bit of stick on the front here, but that can be fixed. You can get hold of this grill cloth and update it if you wanted to. I suspect that the owner of this one, Graham Elks, will keep it exactly as it is, but that's in some ways a good thing to do, because it keeps the amp as original as possible. Well, I can tell you, when we get further down the road talking about what these things fetch these days, then you'll agree that it probably makes sense to keep that on there. Now, think about this Marshall logo. You might say, oh yeah, them are 10 a penny, everybody's got them. Well, as I look around in here, I can see similar ones. They are very, very similar, but I have to say, just looking at it, none of them are exactly the same. Not as this one. I've got reissues and all sorts of things in here, but you're going to see them a little bit later. So I think the logo itself is just that little bit different. Okay, well, here we are handheld for a few minutes that are used in this combo. These are Roller Celestians, and these are the real deal things. These are not your everyday copies or your made in China ones or any of that. As you can see, they're basically the 25 watts and 16 ohms, but you've got a couple of them in there, so my guess is, yeah, you've got a slightly different ohm range when they're plugged in. There's a few codes up there. Well, maybe you can see them. It's not that easy to see them codes up there, but there they are. Now, looking at the speakers from here, you can see that they've probably been in there forever. Don't look to me like they've been pulled out or thrown away or changed or anything else. You know, it looks pretty cool. You can see in the bottom of the the combo there. It all looks absolutely, totally original. And that's what it is. When we come out the back, you can see across the back. It's had a few little scuffs on it, but bearing in mind it's come from 1976, I think that's a pretty good achievement. And the same goes for along this top panel too. You can see that, well, even some of the screws are a little bit rusty. It's got the usual sort of grilling to let all that heat out, and trust me, it does need to let it out. And there's the typical handle of the period, which is also, looks like it's never been off to me. You've got the normal on and off and the rest of it. It says JMP on it, which is nice. And one of the biggest problems is that, like on the front of the amp, you can hardly see any of the controls. They've all been worn off over the years. But it's even still got its sticker on the front warning you about the apparatus having to be earthed. How good's that? The one thing that's currently not operational is that red light there, and there's another one on order, but I've just got to wait a little bit to get it in. Well, that's some idea of the amp in the condition that it's in externally. And you've probably seen the earlier video, and if you haven't, it's down there in the text. As is a lot of stuff that relates to this sort of amp. Yeah, that sort of thing. Stuff that you might find every day and stuff you might not. There'll probably be a fair few links. But if you haven't seen inside, go back and click on the other one and it'll give you a bit of a run through. And maybe at some stage we'll have a good closer look on the main board and the rest of it. Well, actually, thinking about it, that's nonsense, isn't it? Because I've got to pull the chassis out to do the little red light. Yeah, that doesn't work. So my guess is I'll have the camera out when we do that. So you're going to hear this at the end of the video, or Graham will play it, or somebody will play it, and you'll get an idea of what this JMP 2100 Marshall lead and bass 50 watt sounds like. So while we're in here, I just thought you'd like to have a little sort of run through of some of the bits of gear that I've got kicking around and why I've got them. It's most important as to why I've got a particular product, because, you know, guys will say, oh yeah, amps, you know, they're okay, they all have their own reason, don't they? What I always found was that each and every amp has its own tones, but it has its own flavour of feel when you play it. One of the very reasons that there's lots of them in here. We'll start with the top one. Anybody that's seen this before, well, you might have seen it, you might not. This is the most recent purchase I've made, actually, on, you know, the bigger amps and that sort of stuff. This one's it's a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, and it's one of those multi-watt things, so you can have different channels on different watts and things like that. Now, I was doing that way back a very long time ago on a Mesa Boogie tri-axis and 290 rack. Anybody who's had one of them will know what I'm talking about. Awesome piece of gear. You could drive the channel on that, the lead channel that is. It's sort of half power compared to the rest, and really get the tones out of that. A great piece of gear. And I suppose in its own way the multi-watt's probably a sort of similar type of thing. Well, that's what I think. Well, what do I know? Anyway, this is it's 100 watt. Yeah, you can look down there. You've got 100 watt or 50 watts, which makes sense, I guess. And it's a 3-channel jobby with, you know, all the usual things, the loop on it and the solo and all the other things that everybody likes these. Well, you do like them, don't you? the Mesa Boogie Amps 4, and I think this one's as good as any I've ever had. It's an awesome piece of gear. So that's the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, 100 watt head, multi-watt. And just before I do move on from this one, I just wanted to talk about its vintage mode. On these channels you've got raw, vintage and modern, I think it is on the top end ones, at least. The vintage channel has always been, well, my favourite channel for lead guitar. And it takes me really down to the amp below it. Now then, when you're looking at this, make no mistake, this thing, it can move houses. The dual rectifier Road King 2. is that first of all it's version 2, and I used to have a version 1. It was a combo in green. I remember it was sitting over there, and it sat there from the day I had it to the day I sold it, because you couldn't pick it up. It was absolutely that heavy, incredibly heavy piece of gear. So I sold it, and it didn't quite have the sounds that the version 2 has. For some reason it just didn't quite do it for me. It's on my website, tonymckenziecom, but I think that's the most you'll ever see of it, is a few pictures really, because it wasn't for me. I sold it, I lost a lot of money, but later down the road I bought this amp, and I bought it on the back, so to speak, of the Mark 1, but I knew that the Mark 2 would be a little bit better. As far as features go, this amp absolutely has it all. You can even take 2 separate speaker cabs and flip between them as you go from channel to channel. It's awesome. Everything's controllable by channel, so you can have effects loop A or effects loop B, or you can have 50 watts this, or what they call simulcast tubes, which means that you can have sort of EL34s and 6L6GCs mixed on the same channel at the same time. It's all a bit weird, so you could have EL34s, 6L6 separately, or any combination, and it's just an awesome thing that you don't see on anything really except Mesa Boogie amps. Now, like I said, to be honest, there's very little that I don't like about this amp. I look around the back here, there's so much to see, I can't really show it you. I can try, but there might be a picture or not. But you've got, well, it's endless round the back. I'm not even going to try and convince you. What you should be doing is this thing here is reviewed on YouTube, and this one was reviewed on YouTube too, and they'll all be down in the text. So as we go around these amps, always go and look down in the text so you can go and learn more about the individual amp. It makes a hell of a difference, and it'll change your view on an amplifier that alternatively you might have said, well, that's not for me, and it probably is for you, you just don't realize it. So this Road King 2 effectively is a 4-channel amp. Yeah, 4 channels with 3 modes on each channel, which makes it almost endless. It's got the solo, and it's got the loops on it. It's got a number of loops and controllers and all the stuff. Yeah, absolutely worth looking at. And this one, when I bought it, it was 120 volts because the guy had imported it to England, you know. So I paid about 1,500 quid for this one, a £1,600 second hand, many years ago, and it's been in the studio ever since, and I used it for so many different things. Last album I made came mainly off this one, but I did have some other amps involved, but this one in its vintage mode on channel 3, honestly, you don't need anything else. It's awesome. Now we are going to whip around these and have a look at the speaker cabs as we go. This one, you'll find I've got nearly every cab in here is Marshall, nearly every one, but there's a few different flavours of them. This one's a 1960A, and this uses, if I remember right, these sort of G12H 70 watts or 75 watts, something like that. What I found with this cab is you can have it in mono or stereo, you can have it 8, 16 ohms, I think you can have 16. But the fact is, it doesn't really matter what amp you put above it, it always sounds good. You just get great sounds out of this cab, and they're not that expensive. Well, they're not if you're in England, but if you're somewhere else, they could be, well, they could be a bit of a bad deal. So bear that in mind, won't you, when you're seeing these 1960A cabs. Some people like the B's, the big square one. But I like the 1960A, and as we go round, see if you can spot it. Well, I'll tell you. Well, what I've got here is one of those Waza craft things. Now, if you don't know anything about Waza, it's a real weird name. Now, Wazacraft is a sort of invention of the Japanese that says, oh, the master of building, or whatever you want to call it. And this amp is 150 watts. Yes, this is one of them amps that uses that tube technology, you know, like a simulation of a tube. And it's one of the reasons I bought it, but these were like £2,500 just for this head when they were new. I paid about 800 from Sound Effects in Ormskirk in the UK. And for what it was, I thought it was a pretty good deal, really. What do you want for your money? 150 watts. It's got like a sort of simulated tube. Looks like a tube, but it's really firmware that fits inside there. And the one that I've got fitted in, apart from the standard one, is a Steve Vai one. You still don't sound like Steve Vai, strangely enough. You do know that, don't you? Yeah. So Wazacraft, lots of different features. From this end, you've got things like the internal or the two, I'll call them tubes. Then we've got the line out, airfield, recording live or blend, which changes the tone somewhat. Down this end, you've got the cabinet resonance, like vintage, modern or deep, and surely does that. And lastly, we've got the power control. We can go 1 watt, 50 watt, 100 watt, or max, which is 150 watts. So it's a very flexible amplifier, and it's got its little floor pedal down on the floor, which you probably glimpse a bit later. So quite a nice amp. It's not a tube amp, but it has its place for certain in this studio. If you want the heavier stuff, you can get it out of this, but you can get it out of so many different amps in here. Yeah, what more can I say about it? Except that it is reviewed, once again. Go down in the text and have a look for the Wazacraft amp, and go and find out what this amp's really all about, because there's so much to learn about this amp. Oh my God, what's that? Some mad scientist's goggle box? Who knows? Well, of course, I know, and you know too. That's a Kemper rack. I used to have the, what do they used to call them now? Oh, that's it, the Geek's handbag. You've seen the one that you can carry around. It's got a sort of leather bit on the top. I had it a fair old while. And what happened basically was that Kemper said, oh yeah, we're going to be able to upgrade the amp and plug in a power amp in the back of it. This is how the story went. But of course Kemper then later reneged on what he said he was going to do for various reasons. I mean, I understand his reasons, but you don't say you're going to do it and then back out, do you? Well, that's exactly what they did. So I sold the handbag. Didn't suit me anyway, so it didn't match my hair. And I bought the rack unit, and from that day to this I've had it in here, and I sampled some of my amps and put them up on their Kemper website, so you can go and download them. And some people say that they're pretty good tones, and well, others don't say anything. I got fed up of waiting for the, you know, for the power upgrade. So I went and put a powered amplifier inside this one myself. Well, how did I do it? Well, it's simple. You go down there in the text once again. And I bought this main board from a company called Ritter Amps. I think they were named Ritter. Yeah, from Germany. And I fitted it in here. So it's sort of, if I remember, they like 90 watts in total. I think 45 watts a side or something like that. But it was loud enough for what I wanted. And I'm sure it would have been loud enough for what you wanted too. So down in the text you can go and find out more about that. I've done a few reviews on the Kemper thing, and of all the simulators that are out there, I honestly do believe that the Kemper is probably the best sounding one that isn't riddled with complexity like some of them are. The Helix doesn't sound quite as good as that, I don't think, although I own a Helix and I've got no problems with that either. But the more complex stuff, no, it's not for me. And when you've got a company behind it that don't, you know, they have a bit of an attitude sometimes. Well, I don't have a lot of time for people like that. Well, this one, oh yeah, well, this one can have a bit of an attitude when they say they're going to sell an upgrade for the power amp and then don't. You know, to me, that's a bit of bad customer service. But I've had it since 2012, a long time. And is there a new one going to come out anytime soon? Do you know what? I guess there probably is. This is just about the only non-Marshall cab I've got in here. As you can see, it's one of them Wazacraft things. And this was developed specifically for that amp that's up at the top, the Wazacraft amp. This is a 2B12, and I forget the wattage and the rest of it, but the speakers are specifically designed for that amp. So needless to say, when I could get hold of one really cheap, I think I paid 200 and something odd pounds for this. Might have been a bit more. Been a while since I've owned it. But I decided I wanted one, so here it is. So now you know. Okay, well, I've sort of moved along a bit here to the cheap stuff. Well, not quite. These are Bogner Brixton amps. And Mr. Bogner had a bit of methodology behind it. Try saying that when you're drunk. As you'll notice, if you look careful at these, you don't see, honestly, you don't see any tone controls or anything like that. Well, there sort of is, but not as you know them. So what are they all about, Tony? Well, let's think about it for a minute. They're only a low-powered amp. I think they're sort of 7 watts. Here we are. Yeah, they're sort of 7 watts or 20 watts or something like that. I know they're not very high-powered. I forget most about them, but once again, the reviews are down there in the text. If you want to find out everything about that little amp, and you should, I'll tell you why in a moment, then go down in the text and click it and watch the review, because you'll learn a lot about that. And you'll learn a lot about tube amps with it as well, because when you go and look at many amps, take this one below or any of them in this room, what you'll find is that they tend to have these tone stacks or lots of controls along for treble, middle, bass and all the rest of it. Well, what Mr. Bogner figured out was this, that, well, that's all well and good, but it takes away the sort of preamp drive. Now, when he come up with this, I'm sure he didn't come up with it overnight, because what I think he did is he looked back at those early 50s amps and saw there was no tone stack. No treble, no bass, no this, no that, no the other. Just like this amp. So what he did is he put in a few little components behind these switches. And I mean a few components. Yeah, so you can switch in and out particular tones that he decided were the dogs, so to speak. Well, what does it do? Well, it makes an amplifier that can have so much drive on it. You would be shocked by how much drive's on the Bogner Brixton. Now, they did have a whole series of these little amps at one time, named after different places. I think there's a Barcelona and, well, you name it, a few of them. But you can pick them up relatively cheap. I'm talking in the sort of $750 mode, or maybe even less if you fish around a lot. I paid about £700 if I remember right, and it was so good I bought a second one. Now you can see on the second one it's been recovered. It's not perfect, and I want to get some things to put on these corners because I'm not as good as Bogner at doing that. But I just wanted to differentiate the two. I did make a video showing the two amps with different preamp tubes, and one of them had got a 5751. I forget which one it was, but it's in the video down there if you go and watch it. And you'd be amazed at the difference this little preamp tube made, and there was no other difference. Same guitar, same volume, same settings, just a different preamp tube. If nothing else, it's worth going and looking at that video, because you will learn something from it about preamp tubes. And I also, by the way, once again converted both of these from 120 volts to 240 volts, and I'll show you exactly how you can do it if you live in Singapore or Australia or anywhere where it's an H&K colony type of thing. Yeah, it could be a very useful video for you, and you buy one of these cheap and it's all rock and roll. I just wanted to show you them. They don't look much, but oh my god, it's all in the videos. Okay, well, what's the next one? Well, this is an amp that you might have heard of. They're getting more commonplace these days. But when I bought that amp, they were almost unknown. Well, there is a story behind this one. Yeah, and it's an interesting story, and it goes back to a friend I had and other stuff. I bought a guitar from a guy named Awesome John, or Asim Kangunduz. I think that's how you'd say it. I think he came from Turkey, something like that. But in any case, he was a brilliant guitar player. He wasn't good. That was the wrong word. Yeah, I would say he was brilliant. Cutting a long story short, anyway, I bought this guitar off him, and over the years from when I bought it, it was called the Dream, and there's a website called dreamstrat.com, which you should really go and have a look at and learn about the Dream Strat. They cost Fender $70,000 to make for Awesome John. I won't tell you any more about it, but don't worry about that. But go and have a look at the guitar, because you will learn something. Yeah, you think you know everything, but you don't know that one. Anyway, we were talking about 6 months or 9 months before Awesome John, he passed away. And he got one of these, and he's saying, Tony, you need to get one of these. And he was so sincere about what he said. He wasn't just trying to get me buy one type of thing. That's not how he was. It's not how I am either. So anyway, I called the company up. Pierre Angelo, that's the man. He's the owner. And at the time, I sort of went through all the specifications of what I wanted and all the rest of it. And then I said, well, what colour cabs have you got? Because all my amps around here are all one colour, black. I said, it's awful. I said, I need another colour. What about red or white or? No, can't do that. So at that time I gave up, and I just stopped and thought, well, I've got enough amps. You know how it goes. A number of months later, 6 months or 9 months later, Awesome John passed away. And you know, I thought about him a lot, because he's one of these guys who had a load and load of information, and he'd been a pro guitarist for years across America. So he really knew his stuff. He'd played with all sorts of other guitarists. Yeah, literally an awesome player. And it kept going through my mind, Tony, you need one of these amps, you need one of these amps. So anyway, I cut a long story even shorter. I went back to Pierre Angelo, and I said, oh, do you remember me? Oh yeah, Tony, yeah, of course I remember you. Yeah, Awesome John, and all this stuff. And I said, well, that amp, you know. He says, oh, don't worry, everything's changed, he said. I said, what do you mean? He says, oh yeah, well, Steve Vai's buying them now, and Joe Satriani's bought some for his new album that he is making, and he's done this and he's done that. All this stuff, all this different stuff. And I said, wow. He says, yes, it's expanded dramatically. They're brilliant amps, they always were, and da. I said, well, what about the vinyl colour? Don't worry, he says. What colour do you want? You can have any colour you like. We've changed. I thought, what a great thing, you know, fully customised thing. Anyway, Pierre Angelo actually made this one for me, put it together. It's all signed on the back. I won't show you that, because you can go down in the review and check the review about the Mezzabarba M Zero One, which is what this amp's name. It doesn't look that much, but I can tell you now, it's actually the best built amplifier I have ever owned. And it's probably one of the best sounding amplifiers I've ever owned too. They're not cheap, but the great thing about it is you can go and learn about one and see what you think. Yeah, Awesome John was exactly right. And I always remember him for when he was telling me this stuff, you know, and that sort of thing. R.I.P. Awesome John, wherever you are, my friend. Yeah, I'm down here. A Diezel Hagen. Now, I don't know what people know about Diezel amps and this particular one, Diezel Hagen, and all the rest of it. But one thing I can tell you is if you play metal or any of the good stuff, yeah, even rock, this amp is a monster. It is absolutely awesome, and it has an absolutely unique sound. Yeah, I bought this one second hand. Well, I say second hand. There's a guy who had two of them, and this was the backup one. So he didn't use the backup one. So he put it up for sale, and I bought it for about £1,600. That's about $2,100 or something like that. Anyway, there it is. In it came. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 channels. You'll see there's loads of switches, and you can pre-store your settings and all the stuff that goes with it. Like I said before, on every amp, go down in the text and you can go and watch the review about this one. But there's one thing I wanted to raise the point about on this amp while we're just passing. This is the very amp that had the JJ tubes in it that lit up like a light bulb. How I didn't have an amp that had burned out is beyond me. I just happened to be standing right there and it lit up. Literally, it glowed. Yeah, you've seen E.T. where that light's coming out of that room, haven't you? Well, it was like that. The whole place lit up. So I switched it off really quick, and it turned out that it was a JJ Tube, a Rebel. It was a Rebel that blew up and melted and did all its stuff, but strangely and luckily the amp survived, but it was by the skin of my teeth, and it's pure luck that I was standing there. Anyway, that's the Diezel amp. Anything special about this one? Well, there is actually. Inside there was a modification to the PCB where they looked to me like they designed the PCB slightly wrong, so they did a mod, and it's in the review down there in the text, and you can see this mod, and well, it looks bad. It isn't like the mod that sat in the Friedman, we'll call it that because it wasn't a Friedman, the Friedman amp that had all the bodged main board from a review recently. No, this was one done by an expert. I've got a few notes on this one. I could be wrong about this, but this is what I think it is. It's called a 425A cab. There it is. I don't think it's that common, but that's okay. It's here for a reason. It's different than the 1960As. And why is it different? Well, it's got what they call G12C 25 watt Celestians in it, which makes it a 100 watt cab. Basically, you're not going to get any more than 100 out of it. It was actually developed for the Super 100 Jimi Hendrix head. Yeah, the greenbacks, and it can work in mono and stereo, and it sounds like a 60s cab, and basically that's why it's here. An awesome piece of gear that you don't use by the hour, because some of these amps are a bit aggressive for a cab like that, but it does definitely have its place. I just wanted to show you that. Yeah. Now lastly down here we've got the Diezel Columbus controller, all very nice, and the M Zero One controller for that amp. Oh my god, Tony, what have you got here? Well, yeah, there's a little deviant part of me that keeps sending me away from tube amps. I don't know why. Do you? You don't know why either. Yeah, I suppose it's better than the Friedman. There you go. Let's have a look at this. This is the sort of rack I've had, and this was updated just a few years ago. Or maybe a year, yeah, maybe 18 months or a year ago, something like that. I did it. Well, what have we got? Well, from the top we got the Samsung, I think it's called a Power Bright PB10, this one. And it's got little lights that shine on your rack and that sort of thing, which is what they used to do in, quote, the old days when you couldn't see anything on stage. It's all moved on a bit, but it's got 10 outputs at the back that are like controlled voltage, you know, so there's no spikes and things like that in the volts that control everything else. And let's face it, we've got computer gear in here, because that's what this is, computer gear. Yeah, so it looks after that. Moving down one, we've got the Line 6 Relay G90. And if I want to use that, I can pull this off. And I can use it. All very nice, all does a good job. And one of the things about it is it's fully legal. You get a lot of these things that they've changed the tracking, or should I say the frequencies and things like that, where you end up being illegal, and then you get break-in into the transmission. This is a 2-antenna device, and I think it uses a thing called dual diversity reception. Yeah, well, I won't bore you with it, but don't worry, it's pretty cool. Moving down, you come to the Helix. Well, I have a history with a Helix. I used to have the floor one, but the floor one was too big for me. I did a review of it years ago, and the best Helix review I think I did, and that's down again in the text. You can go and watch it and learn all about that original Helix that I reviewed. It was really a breakthrough product when that came out. And so many people are copying all this stuff these days from where it was at that time. But anyway, I got rid of that, and I had a load of old stuff in here. I won't bore you with it, but I decided to upgrade and use the Helix with an amp. And the amp's just down below, which we're going to look at in a moment. So I spent time with the Helix and set it up as the 4-cable method type of thing, and this comes through into the front for the guitar in from the back. But the thing is about that, that little connector at the front has a particular setting that you can only change on that. You know, people have said to me many times, oh, you should use the loop to do this or that. Well, you can use the loop, but you're lacking the setup of this that's on this one, and it isn't on the others. So that's why I ran that through. I created a video about this and how I built the rack and how I changed things around. That's, again, it's in the text, it's all worth looking at. And lastly, down here, I've got this thing here called a Tascam SSR 200. And what that's great for is if you're in a studio and you want to practice yourself, you can put these things on it and different memory and play back for hours. So you can practice all the things you want to practice. It's even got loops and all sorts of things in it. I think it's a great device, and that's why it's in this rack. Yeah, overall, I'm not disappointed with this at all. I paid about £770 or 800, somewhere around the £800 mark for that, brand new. And I can tell you now, it's an awesome piece of gear. Now looking at this amp, you might say to yourself, oh, it's one of them JVM 410H's. And of course you'd be completely, totally wrong. This is a JVM 410 HJS for Joe Satriani. And I can tell you now that this amp is so different than a 410H, you would never believe me. Well, you wouldn't unless you go to my website and watch the review about the 410H. And then go to my website and watch the review about this. And then go watch the videos from down in the text. This amplifier is probably the most flexible Marshall amplifier I have, bar nothing. It can do it all. It sounds awesome. I won't bore you too much with it because I really don't want to, because you should be going and having a look at the video about this amp. It's a really, really good amp. Finding them in this condition is really very difficult because this amp's discontinued, believe it or not. I don't know why. They should have discontinued the 410H, and I think Joe Satriani had something to do with it because he went off onto other amps. I think that's the gist of it. But there you go. That's it. 410 HJS, and I don't regret buying it at all. Now I won't bore you too much with this, but that cab at the bottom is yet another. It says JCM 900, but it's basically a 1968 cab. And it's just like the first Marshall cab we looked at earlier, and it's one of the favourite cabs really. And again, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but that's the controller for the Helix. And as you can see, it's got it all there. It does everything really. It's small enough to be in a relatively small studio like this one is, even though I'm trying to get the studio updated at the moment. Got all the planning permission, but I can't find anybody to build it. How ridiculous. Anyway, there it is, and you'll notice behind it that there's the Marshall JVM Joe Satriani controller. You'll also notice that it's not plugged in because I don't need it, because I can control everything from the Helix and the Helix Floor controller there. So I can switch channels, I can do this, I can do that. There's nothing you can't do with it, and it's like a third of the price of the AXE-FX. It's also cheaper by a fair amount than the Kemper. Well, the Kemper is as easy to use. I think the Helix rack has got its advantages, in particular when it comes down to controlling other equipment. You know, it's nice and easy. Now, I'm not saying the Kemper hasn't got a floor pedal. It has, indeed, and I have one. I just didn't show it you. Yeah, there's a quick shot of it so that you can say you've seen one. I hardly ever use it if you want the truth, but that's life. But back to this one, you can see I've got a couple of controller pedals there, and I can control the amp, and I've got all the presets, and everything that I'd ever really want is there in that unit. And because the Marshall JVM 410 HJS is such a part of the overall tone, to be frank, I don't really need the amp simulators. I think they're a bit of a, well, when I'm surrounded by all this stuff in here, the amp simulators are what are they exactly? They don't inspire me in any real way. The amps have that tone with no jiggery pokery going on. I think it's pretty awesome. Well, here I am back on the floor again. But I want to draw your attention to these two here. I did reviews of each one of these within the last year or so, maybe a bit longer than that, maybe 18 months or something like that. But these in their own way are awesome little amps, and they cost about sort of street price. If I remember right, they were about £700 each. The top one is like a Mark II JMP, you know, the old thing. And it's a vintage amp, and it sure sounds like a vintage amp. It can be low or high on the output. I think it's 7 or 20 watts, something like that. Don't have all the exact things in my head. I've got that many things in here. But it is what it is, and this one's snakeskin covered, and I don't know whether you can see that okay. It's a fabulous finish. Cost me about £700, and that came from Fair Deal Music in the UK. Yeah, I think it's fairdealmusic.co.uk or com. Be one or the other. Now the bottom one is the later amp. They're both the SC series, you know, the studio series, by the way. But this was a later amp. It was again in a limited release. Both of these are limited. But this was JCM 800 Lead Series Studio, and it's called a Stealth. Yeah, that's its title. And I've used this one quite a lot, actually. You'd be surprised how much you'd use a little lamp like this in a studio. These others are fantastic if you want to get particular tones. But when it comes back to it, when you want to get that JCM 800 tone, there's only really a few things that can do it, and this is one of them. Fantastic little amp. Again, they're both reviewed. Down in the text, you can go and click on them, and you'll learn so much about these two amps. You'll probably want to go and try and buy one. I'm not even sure you can still get them, but worth a look. If anybody's got them, it'll be Fair Deal Music. And go and tell Gary Tony McKenzie sent you, because that's where he works these days. Below that, you can just about see it there. It's a 1x12 cab that came, well, it didn't come with the JCM 800 SC, but I bought it, and it has a particular tone, and they matched well together. So I'm not going to say any more about that, except you can see that I record through it quite a lot. Yeah, let's move on. It's back down here on the floor. Now hey, listen up. When it comes back to tube amps, there's only one granddaddy of them all. And here it is. The Marshall JMP. There it is. I think it says JMP on it. Yeah. This one is built around a 1967 Marshall amp that they remade a while back. And this one's a hand-wired amp. Now the hand-wired amp, it's another story. If you've never played through one of these with it cranked, you've never lived. You think you know guitar amps, but you don't. And it's only when you play through one of these at real volume that your guitar and the rest of it, how you play and how it inspires you, will change how you understand this amp. There's no question in my mind. This amp is along with all the best amps in this room and all the other amps that I've got that you won't even see in this video. It's right up there with the best. But there's that problem, isn't there? It's a 100-watt amp, and the output will shake you to your core. Trust me. You'll know the tone all right if you've listened to Hendrix or you've listened to any of those guitarists year after year after year after year through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and well, right the way through to today. People are still using these things. Less so maybe today, but definitely so if you use other devices, which we're going to have a look at in just a second. So that's the Marshall 100-watt Plexi hand-wired, and it's just awesome. Well, just while we're here, I do want to touch on something that I saw the other day that was, I just thought was so funny. It was just hilarious. I went on YouTube and I watch videos from time to time, different people and things like that. I've always been a fan of the Tube Screamers. You can see I've got a few of them around, but I've got a whole lot more of them. The Tube Screamer was, when it first came out, was, well, it was the dogs. We could say that. You'll know what I mean. It was absolutely the device that changed this amp into being something different. And the 50 watts, and the JCM 800s, and the you name them, you can name them all. That little device, the Tube Screamer, this one's a TS808, there's derivatives there, changed the way that this amp sounded and played. It changed it for the better. And I got this guy on YouTube. Some of you might know who he is or don't know who he is. I don't know particularly who he is and I don't really care. But he was, I hate Tube Screamers type of thing. I thought to myself, is this guy nuts? Where's he been? Where's he been? What? Maybe he's a snowflake. I don't know. But if you've got someone who claims to be a bit of a genius on guitar, as they do, and then he hates Tube Screamers, well, yeah. Here's a quick story. Many years ago, might be 20 years ago even, I went to see a guy named Michael Schenker. You ever heard of him? You should have. Michael Schenker, when I went to watch him, had gone through hell and back. Even at one time, he went to his house and somebody sold it for him. Well, he was on tour. Yeah, it's a long story, but go check the internet. But anyway, a real nice guy. Michael Schenker. He could get a bit drunk at the time, or he could this, or he could that. Listen, you know he's talking about him in that way. Everybody goes through that from time to time. But anyway, there he was, and you can see how close I am to you. Well, if I was to come about this close, that's how near I was to Michael Schenker. Yeah, I was very near to him. And right in front of me was a whole stack, you know, the square one and this one and the amp on the top. And I think it was a JCM 800, but I could be wrong. It could have been just a 50 watt or whatever. Anyway, there it was. And I'm sitting really just right by him. And the whole band's there on a little 6 foot wide stage. Wasn't a very good place. The rigger, if anybody knows it. Anyway, so I'm watching him and I look down and I'm thinking, I'm going to see thousands of pedals here. This guy's going to be, you know, because he had the tone. He was the man. And what did I see? I saw one of these. And I saw a wah-wah. And that was it. Yeah, one of these in a wah. It was awesome. He sounded awesome. He wasn't good. He's as good as any of these guys that are out there today. He really was. And he probably still is. Just an awesome player. And when I look back at that, it was like a moment in time that you never forget. Once you see somebody as good as he was with just a couple of little bits and pieces like that, and he was incredible. It makes the other guy saying, I don't like these, seem a little bit out of place. Yeah, I don't know the answers behind any of that, and I don't really want to, but it was just an observation from when I went on YouTube, and I don't know. So there you have that little section. Okay. What have we got here? Well, you might say it's like all the other Marshall cabs, but it isn't. This one, the first thing you notice is it's got this, what they call a salt and pepper grill. You'll see it. I might even put a picture up there where you can see the grill. Because it does tell a story. It's got a small logo. And it's got this 100 in the corner. That's one of the things that gives it away. Go back and have a look at some of the Hendrix videos and you'll see that some of these cabs have got this 100 in the corner. Yeah. So what you've got in here is 4 25 watt Celestion speakers. I think they're greenbacks, but they could be some other derivative. It doesn't really matter. But it was sold at the time as what they call a hand-wired cab. Now, it's stupidity because all the cabs are hand wired. But it's very, very reminiscent of those very early 70s or end of 60s cabs. And yeah, that's why I bought it, because of this thing just above it. Yeah, you can get the idea, can't you? Yeah, it can drive it through hell and back. We're talking about this thing here. Oh my God, I've even got a plug here off that 2100 amp that we did. I must get to put that back on. Let's leave it down there for now. Yeah, this is a Boss tube amp expander. Now what's great about this is it works great with that thing there. You can see it on camera now. Yeah, the tube amp expander. So what happens is, comes out the back of the amp into this, out of this into that speaker at the bottom. You got that? Yeah, of course you have. All nice and simple. By the way, this has been reviewed as well, just as that amp has. They're all down in the text. You need to go and look at them. You might learn something. But basically this is like a reactive load, and what that can do is take the volume of that amplifier there and turn it down. In fact, I can have that amp running flat out and I can talk over it. And you can adjust varying levels and tones and all sorts of things. Let's just run through it. I've got a reactive load section, resonance, presence, and speaker volume. Now the thing is, if that amp was only a 20 watt amp, I can put 20 watts in and still get 100 watts out, believe it or not, because there's an amp inside this. But it's one of those amps that it's like a flat response, so it sounds just like it did there, except it comes out quieter. So I think it's an awesome piece of gear. It's also got an FX loop. It's got a couple of effects in there. It's got a solo and EQ. You've got a pedal at the back here, as you can see, hopefully. And it's got amp control, so if you had a different amp that you can switch channels with, well, you can do it and pre-program everything. It's got a number of settings down here. Well, there's 10 separate settings that you can have. There's a reverb, there's a line out, and there's a phones, and you can turn it on and off, and it's all really rocking and rolling. And that's how you take one of them amps and you make it sound absolutely awesome. You can't do it any other way today except with something like this. Now there's a few of them around, but this one's reviewed, and I also reviewed one or two of the others as well that are out there. So you should go and have a look down in the text again if you want to see more about that. As for down there, well, there's all sorts of things. It's part of my Wawa collection, that is, and I have lots of them around. And the dual rectifier Road King button there is literally off the Road King, because I don't particularly use that. I just set the amp up and record. Yeah, all very nice. I won't bore you too much with any of that now, but notice those Roland cables in that little box. Yeah, I still have them and they all still work beautifully. Well, here I am again. More amps. It's all good, really. I'm only kidding, of course. Well, let's run through them. Just a few of the ones I've got here. I have more, but not here. This one at the top is the triple rectifier that I bought about a year ago, or something like that, off Reverb, from a guy who said it was mint and perfect and all the rest of it, and when I got it, it wasn't mint and wasn't perfect, and it was 120 volts, so I converted it to 240 volts, and then we retubed it and we did a load of other things on it. This one probably owes me what it cost me, plus the parts. I'm never going to get my money back, but there it is. It's got a bit of a little fault on it that relates to the when you're in the spongy mode, the foot switch doesn't always work right, and I think I've got an idea of how to fix that these days, and it's just a question of having the time of going back and doing it. Right now I'm just a bit too busy. But nevertheless, it is a triple rectifier. It's not a dual rec, and it's got most of the things. It's got its 3 channels, and importantly, across here you've got the vintage modes again, the thing I like so much, and that I got originally from the Road King 2, really. So not an amp I'm just going to throw out any day soon, but I might fix it and sell it and get something else. You know how it goes. But I have reviewed a triple rectifier also on my website. I think that one is. could be down below, but down below might be a video, or it might be on my website, depends which one. But in either case, wherever it is, you'll learn something about a triple rectifier from Mesa Boogie. Now moving down to this one, this is one of the amps that I like more than some of the others. Well, why? Well, because I built it. This is one I made from a kit. Yeah, it's a JTM 45 and it runs up to 30 watts. And at 30 watts you can just about have this flat out through that cab over there with the 100 watts in the corner. And it sounds particularly awesome, even just as it is. And then if you put one of those pedals in the front that I was talking about, it'll sound even better. So quite a nice amp. I know how it's made because I made it, and yeah, very nice. I bought this case, by the way, from Tube Amp Doctor. I don't know many people that had them of this quality. This one is ultra high quality. So I bought it from Tube Amp Doctor and fitted the amp into it, and I've had it ever since. It's got a little modification that I took from a Marshall design and put in there by myself, which gets rid of the hum. All very nice. I've had it a while. That's reviewed too, and that'll be down there in the text as well. Well, this is a Marshall amp that a lot of guys particularly dislike, and they dislike it for a particular reason, not because necessarily of its sound. They dislike it because this amp is notorious for having a board that runs away with the bias voltage and does the board in and does all the various bits and pieces inside. Now if you go and buy a board that's about £120 these days for a replacement, well, I think it's a revision 20, that will fix all of those problems. That's exactly what I did with this one, and then I covered it. So you can see two videos for this amp. One is the fix of the amp to get the new board in and all the rest, and I'll show you one or two other little tricks so you don't get any more trouble. And the second video is all about how I recovered this amp on a Sunday morning, and it's all there on the video. No getting away from it. I speeded it all up and there was nowhere to hide. What else can I say? Well, what I should say is that back in 1995 and 1996 I wrote an album called ENIAC that had some really nice tracks on there, and the guitar sound I never really bettered. I used the Black Ibanez that a lot of people have seen. That's an RG 550 Limited, and it had got a few specific pickups in and things like that. But this was the amp, not this exact one, the one that I had all that time back I sold, hence why I bought another. But I bought this one, and I've got that tone again, and it was a brilliant sound, and there's no getting away from it. Some people don't like it, maybe, but they haven't heard the album, have they? Probably. That album still sold lots of albums that I put out there, and when you see people buying them like that, and the music's being streamed all the time like that, it's got to have something in there that people like, because if they didn't have anything in there that people like, there'd nobody to listen to it. So that's my argument for having a TSL 100. Great little amp, JCM 2000 they also call it, and that's mine. Yeah. Now moving along here, we've got a Hughes & Kettner Grandmeister. It's a Grandmeister 36, that one is. And again, I reviewed it. The reason it's here is it's got loads of effects in it, and it does actually sound pretty good, but it's a little bit toppy. But it's a low wattage amp, lots of effects, like I said. I've even got the control pedal down there for it, so I can do all the things I might want to do. And it's a quick, fast fix if you need to get an amp like that. So that's why that's there. Again, I reviewed that one, again, down in the text. So if you want to learn more about the Grandmeister 36 or even the 40, which is very similar, go and watch that review. Now the amp below it is a THD Univalve, if you've ever seen one. It's got a single tube in there and a couple of preamp tubes, yeah. And you can put different tubes in it to get different sounds. And it's if I remember right, this is a Class A amp, which means it has a different type of tone than you'd have on all the others. Hence why it's there. I paid less than £400 for this one because it had got, as you turned it up and down, it had this grating tone. But I fixed that in about 10 minutes. I found out what that was. It was easy to fix. And I've had it ever since. I get it out occasionally, but not that often. Hence it sort of sits up here out the way. Yeah, that's been reviewed too. And I also spoke a lot about things like Class A amplifiers. I think I did a comparison between a couple. It's in the reviews, probably below. Now lastly in here, we've got this one, well and truly hidden out the way. Yes, this one's called the Jackson Ampworks El Guapo. And it's got this picture of this, well, mad Mexican on the board. Something to do with the Three Amigos, I believe. Anyway, long story. But that was developed as a Marshall bass amp that one of the guys owned when he was young. And it had this particular tone. But then they went and enhanced that amp with little switches and things. So you got more of a heavier drive and then a really heavy drive. So it's an amp that meets a lot of criteria, and it still sounds a bit like a Marshall, but it can sound like a lot of amps. Very powerful amp, and yeah, it's one I like. You don't see them, they're all discontinued, but if you do see one and you can see it at the right price, it's absolutely worth buying. This one was a 240 volt one, so there was no mods or anything on that, but I keep it because it's such a great amp. And if you see in the review down below, you see for yourself how well it's made and how it sounds. It's a really nice amp. But often what you don't get to see are things like that up there. It's like it's a 32R Presonus Studio Live mixer, and it's connected to the main unit by, well, basically RJ45, so you've got the audio going backwards and forwards. So very powerful piece of gear. And the thing above that is a headphone amp. Don't want to get lots of guys in. I don't get so many in these days because I don't go looking for them. The days of where you used to be able to record people and actually make money, them are long gone. So I've got enough for what I need, and that's all that really matters, I guess. But I just wanted to show you that as well, because there's a load of stuff in this place that nobody ever sees, but the amplifiers and speaker cabs are always really interesting. But here we are back to this one, the star of the show, as you've seen earlier in the video, and it's a pretty awesome amp really. And what you're going to do is you're going to hear it being played, whether it be by me or Graham Elks, that is. Go and check him out, grahamelks.com. And he's a much better player than I am. But if he doesn't have the time to do it, well, I'll just play something and you'll hear it that way. An interesting amp, a JMP 2100 50 watt amp that we just did all the repairs on the previous video. And yeah, you can see, well, you can hear it coming up soon. Well, there you go, my friends. That's it for now. Just a run around the amps that I've got actually in the studio. I have other amps, but they're not always at the studio. They're somewhere else where they're stored. Occasionally they'll come out, and you know, it's like anything else. After a while you want to go and get such and such an amp, and it has this this way of imparting what you play and how you play on you. It's hard to describe, and you know, all the boys that have got the amp simulators will tell you theirs is, oh, it's all the same, it's all the this, all the that, when in reality it's not the same. They don't feel the same as the tube amps. There is no question to that, in my mind at least. And I'm not a complete idiot, I might look one. Don't agree. So I just wanted to show you the amps in particular, and some of the speaker cabs and things like that I have, and try and get across to you some of the reasons why I have them. each and every one of them have that unique tone. Yeah, even though you might say, all the Marshalls are the same, aren't they? Well, no, they're not. And as for the guy who don't like a TS-808, well, you're wakey. Till next time, hope you like this little review. And I'm going to try and get Graham Elk's play at the end of this video through his amp. And then this video will go online. But if he can't come, because he's a busy guy too, then maybe I'll do it instead. It doesn't really matter, you just want to hear the amp, don't you? Of course you do. Don't forget to go to www.tonymckenziecom or my channel and have a look at all those reviews about all them amps. Go and do that, go and have a look, because they are quite unique in the way that they're reviewed. A lot of people don't do what I do. And they're all, each and every one of those videos, definitely worth looking at. I guarantee you will learn something, maybe not much, but maybe a huge amount. And it can often make you think twice about a particular amp, whether it's a good or a bad thing. I mean, let's face it, that recent fried man, I'll call it that, because it had been fried inside. Yeah, the fried man amp, yeah, well, I'll never buy another one of them. Well, what a rubbish that was. And back it went. There's the lesson. Listen for the music. If it's not there, I'll be putting it on another video, but I suspect it will be on the end of this one. Now get out of here.